The regular agenda and item 10, we have one speaker, he's a manager from South Tucson, Luis Gonzalez. Would you like to come before the board? And you have 3 minutes. State your name and get over.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Luis Gonzalez, City Manager for the City of South Tucson, 1601 South 6th Avenue. I'm going to pass out a statement from the Mayor of the City of South Tucson. Unfortunately, I was not able to be here today. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Basically, what we are here for today is to address the issue of this claim. We have sent out a letter of response that came from your clerk board. We merely want to reiterate the content of that particular letter in regards to the claim, where we do not believe that the imposition of a secondary tax was an error, but rather it was intentional. There are 3 issues related to this property tax that we addressed in the letter. First, what I just mentioned, we don't believe that it was an error of sorts. There's sufficient evidence to suggest that that was not the case. The second item is that all of the information that we have gathered has already been submitted to the State Attorney General for review. We are under the impression at this point that investigation is on and continuing at this point. We have not heard anything back from the Attorney General since that was submitted. So we're still waiting to see whether or not they have found any reason to believe that there may or may not have been any criminal activity involved, or intent rather, involved in the imposition of that particular tax. The third thing is that we believe that in the event that this particular tax has been imposed improperly or illegally, then obviously there is a shared responsibility here. The county by law has the fiduciary responsibility to ensure that those taxes are correct and legal prior to setting those taxes. The city, of course, is also responsible, and we take responsibility for some of that, even though that happened under a previous administration back starting in 2011. So I'm not sure exactly how the legal process will continue. We have been contacted by members of the state legislature in regard to the possibility of some legislation that would address the issue that currently does not exist in state law, and that is, what is the remedy for something like this. Apparently it's the first time this has ever happened. I would
Mr. Gonzalez,
any questions that you might have.
Okay, thank you very much. Any questions for Mr. Gonzalez? Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. What's the pleasure of the board?
Madam Chair.
Supervisor Hernandez.
First, let me say thank you. Thanks for being here, Luis and Mr. Gonzalez, and I'm glad to see you up and around. My questions are relative for our council. My understanding is that when we received the ordinance from the city of South Tucson, so that I don't lead the attorney, what were our options once we received the ordinance, when it was originally imposed?
Madam Chair, Supervisor Hernandez, there were no options really. It's ministerial duty at that point to include what was given to us by the taxing jurisdiction, to include that in the formulation of the tax bills.
Madam Chair, Mr. Counsel, do we have Mr. Gonzalez has indicated that we have a fiduciary responsibility for legal review of that tax levy. Is that the case?
Madam Chair, Supervisor Valdez, no.
Okay. At this point, I think there's a little bit of interesting gamesmanship going on for a couple of different reasons. The issue here is that the lawsuit cites a section of code that is intended, as Mr. Gonzalez pointed out, for errors in the rate. How does that apply to this particular case?
Madam Chair, Supervisor Valdez, there's a difference between an illegal tax and an illegal tax rate. This notice of claim process that has this matter before the board is only here by virtue of the claim that this was somehow an illegal tax rate. The actual, if there's indeed a issue about the legality of the underlying tax itself, and there seems to be some dispute to that, the appropriate forum for that is not this board, but it is a court of law. The court would then determine whether the tax was illegal or not.
So today, as we sit here and look at item number 10, what are our options here as a board today?
Well, Madam Chair, Supervisor Valdez, technically, because you do have a choice or matter before you, you have two options, either to essentially approve the claim or dispute the claim. If you were disputing the claim, you would be essentially saying the grounds for that dispute is that this is the wrong form, that the appropriate form, the real issue here is not a tax rate, but the real issue is the validity of the tax itself, and that should be resolved elsewhere, not by this board.
Now, did the original ordinance, when the levy was originally imposed, was that signed off or reviewed by council?
Madam Chair, Supervisor Valdez, yes, for some years, yes, and apparently for 1 year, not. But in any event, that is for the city of South Tucson and their legal counsel to make that determination as to the legality of that ordinance and that tax. And in fact, that's what that legal review is for.
So it was not our council, but rather the city's council?
That's correct.
Okay. All right, Madam Chair, I think we're going to get as much clarity as we're going to get on this issue at this point. I move that we dispute the claim on item number 10.
Second.
Motion and a second to dispute the claim. Objections? Hearing none, motion carries unanimously. Moving on to item 11.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez.